members of the public who are watching this meeting. And then for the folks who are going to be, presenting an application, we have one application here on the agenda today. I'm going to ask that they keep their cameras off until they're ready to give their presentation, and then they can pop those on and they'll be part of the live stream. So Mitch, right. I'll let you get the meeting called to order.
Okay. Go ahead and call the meeting to order for the NFP Review Board for February 23rd, 2021. And we'll start with a roll call. Jamie, do you want to do a roll call for us?
Yeah, I actually have two announcements right before that. One, that this meeting is being conducted electronically in order for members, staff, and the public to comply with the emergency order under MCL 333.2253, Gathering Prohibitions and Mask Order, which was issued by Robert Gordon, Director of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services on October 29, 2020. And then when I call your name for roll call, if you will please announce what city and state you are physically located in right now and participating from, and then you can let me know that you're here. So to start off, I have Director Colwick.
Here from Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Director Fuller.
Here from Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Director Leto.
Here, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Director McNellis.
Here from Mattawan, Michigan.
Director Martin.
Here from Kalamazoo, Michigan.
And Director Sylvester.
Here, I'm in Sanibel, Florida.
Excellent.
Okay. Let's see, so we have no absent members.
We have Director Glasser, who's absent.
That's right. Okay. Can I entertain a motion to excuse Director Glasser?
So moved.
Support? Okay. Motion carries.
You could have everyone vote in favor or.
Okay. All in favor for excusing Director Glasser, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Okay, item C on the agenda is the agenda from our last NFP meeting that Jamie sent out beforehand from November 24th, 2020. So were there any comments, additions, anything regarding the, oh, sorry, that's past minutes, adoption of the agenda. And Jamie, you had an item that you wanted to point out and add to the agenda.
Yes, I have one item that I'd like to add under new business. Item number 2, the approval of the 2021 NFP Review Board regular meeting schedule. Since this is your first meeting of the year, you haven't had a chance to approve your 2020 meeting schedule. And so I forwarded to the board members that schedule. It's going to be our regular schedule, which is the 4th Tuesday of each month at 4 o'clock. That'll be March through December. And so I have these dates in front of me. I'll just call them off since they weren't included in the agenda packet. But this is regular meetings on March 23rd, April 27, May 25, June 22nd, July 27, August 24, September 28, October 26, November 23, and December 28th.
Okay, and did you want to go ahead and vote on that now then, Jamie?
No, we can wait until item 2 and that part of the agenda.
Okay, sounds good. So with the addition of that item E2 that Jamie added there, can I entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay, support, Paul?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, now we're on to item D, the approval of the meeting minutes from our last NFP that took place November 24th, 2020. Are there any comments, additions, or otherwise to the meeting minutes that Jamie sent out from the past meeting?
I would
Okay,
move approval as submitted.
okay, sounds good. Got support?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries approval of the meeting minutes from November 24th. And then now we are on to item E on the agenda, which is new business, starting off with our review of 508 Harrison and 660 Gull Road.
Yeah, so I wanted to point out, this is kind of our main item on today's agenda. And this is a site plan in the NFP overlay district for what's being called the River's Edge. It's a redevelopment project of 2 parcels that'll be combined, and the new development that you saw in the site plan will be developed there. I'm going to invite the presenters who are here representing the development team. You guys can go ahead and turn on your cameras. I'll let you introduce yourselves in a moment. For board members, in your packet, you saw the NFP site plan evaluation form. It talks about how the proposed project is an affordable mixed use or mixed income housing development. There's going to be 4 total buildings. So the 2 large buildings that you see up at Gull Road are 4-story apartment buildings. Each of those apartments will have 111 units with a variety of rental rates. So some more affordable up to market rate units. And then along the, I guess, more western part of the property, there's going to be a commercial like live work building. So they'll have some, mixed uses there, both residential and commercial. And part of the reason for this development kind of along the street frontage and sort of a mix of uses is because this property or this area has a couple of different zone districts right now, but in the master plan, this area is proposed to be rezoned to a node zone district. And so it's looking for these sort of vibrant, more dense uses where we have the buildings up, near the sidewalk. They're very walkable. They have, entrances, they're approachable, and that they, offer sort of a mix of, spaces for residential, but also access to, places to eat, to work, just that sort of vibrant commercial space meeting residents' needs as well. So that's part of the reason I think you see the design here. I'll also let the consultants talk a bit about some of the site characteristics or constraints I think that have and how that's influenced the design. So this is a property that is currently owned by the city's Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. It has a long history of industrial uses, and it was the former Kalamazoo tank and silo site. And it has a lot of legacy soil and groundwater contamination at the site as well. It's located partially in the floodplain. And so I know that the design had to work around that site characteristic as well. But then the property owner here has a purchase agreement with the Brownfield property, or with the Brownfield Authority, and that's for the property at 508 Harrison. And then they have a separate purchase agreement for the 660 Gull Road parcel, which is a privately owned parcel. So I'm not sure who wants to start out from the development team. I'll let you guys just kind of talk through the design and some of the elements that you put forth with the site plan. And then I can help lead the board through our evaluation form and kind of looking at each of those natural features that you saw on the list there. So Danielle, do you want to get started? Or Sandy?
I can, if Danielle's not there, I can kick us off.
Yeah.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah, I think I'm here if you hear me now.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. I think you did a pretty good job of introducing the development. I'm Danielle Rhodes with Bison Associates, civil engineer. As far as the NFP scope goes, I think the proposed development aims to minimize impacts to all existing features. There is, obviously, we're here adjacent to Kalamazoo River, and we're proposing, not to impact those side slopes or the river's edge, and all the developments are pulled well away from that, and we're maintaining the existing Kalamazoo Valley Trailway, existing silos and historic features on site. And I don't think there's any impacts to wetlands or anything of that nature. We have applied through Eagle for floodplain permits, and proposed designs compensate accordingly. And I don't think I have a whole lot. I think we have a lot of representation here from OCBA on the landscape end, because I think their scope is maybe the most relevant to the NFP review. I would certainly be open to answer any questions outside of the landscape realm that you may have.
Thanks,
And I
Danielle.
think that's about it.
Yeah, thanks. I think you make a good point too here that the main natural feature and reason this parcel would be included in the overlay district is certainly the Kalamazoo River, runs adjacent to the entire parcel. Does anyone from OCBA want to talk about landscaping plans, or would you like me to kind of walk through the evaluation, or that we'd sort of walk through feature by feature and then offer up any questions we might have?
Either way, we'd be happy to kind of talk through the landscape plan if that would be helpful.
Yeah, why don't we start with that?
Okay. I'm going to point out just a few general things, and then I'm going to turn it over to Debbie to get into, a few more of the specifics. But before we dig into the specifics, Jamie already mentioned, one of the constraints of the site is the presence of the floodplain. And for that reason, you'll notice that a lot of the buildings have been pushed toward Gull Road, making it not feasible to save, some of the trees, because the elevation of those buildings do have to be raised up to get them out of the floodplain. Also, just wanted to point out that the site plan has evolved, as we've collaborated with BICE to preserve trees wherever we can, particularly on the northern end of the site where it's a little bit more heavily treed. We've made some adjustments to the site plan to stay out of those trees as much as possible. And then in regards to that area on the north end of the site, we don't believe that it is considered a woodland. It does not have the presence of healthy understory trees or shrub layers that, as defined in the ordinance, would qualify that area as a woodland. And many of the trees that are present there are invasive species as well. We have walked the site with a certified arborist to, get their professional opinion about the trees that could potentially be impacted on the site. So we have all of that information documented in our tree worksheet that I believe that you have. If not, we can share with you. And additionally, we've had some preliminary conversations with Jamie as she's helped kind of, guide decision-making through this process. So with that, I can turn it over to Debbie to just kind of dig into a few more of the specifics.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. So as she mentioned, we have that worksheet that includes all of the tree species. Of all of the trees that are being removed, those are mostly being removed because we are building the buildings there, or the grade is being influenced. And so the trees, it's not feasible to keep them. But also with a lot of those trees, the ones that are not invasive that could qualify as special status, many of them are damaged, diseased, or dying according to the arborist. And so we're not replacing those, the inches that would be removed for that. So out of all of the trees that we're removing, there are only 14 that qualify as special status, and it is 201 inches. So we are proposing replacing 205 inches when you take into account the ratio replacement of some of the tree species in the zoning ordinance. And all of those trees are placed along the southeastern and the southern edges, kind of along that trail. And then a few of the smaller trees are placed closer to the buildings in the landscape plan. And that is in addition to all of the requirements for the zoning, the standard zoning requirements. So we're actually exceeding by a tree or two the required amount based on the caliper, and continuing to have that diverse species representation of evergreens and deciduous, and keeping that natural boundary along the sides of the site.
Yeah, I will mention, I'm going to quick share my screen so we can all sort of see a shared view of the site plan here. This is the landscape set. So you can definitely see a lot of vegetation features, but what we're looking at here is a new building here, and then a sort of a twin building almost here. And then there's a community space / leasing office here. The comment that Debbie made was about some adjustments that they made, that BICE and OCBA helped make here at the northern end of the site plan. And so some earlier versions, we get a majority of trees that may meet woodland criteria up here. And the drive at one point kind of wasn't quite so tight and narrow. It kind of came out over here and would have required some clearing on this end of the property. And so to help keep all of that intact and keep some trees over here and not disturb this area, especially you're getting closer to the creek. I think we're getting maybe a little bit lower elevation. I could be wrong on that. But they, moved that drive. So it's, very tight up against this building and just turns right into the parking lot here. Or it may have even been a double drive. I think we might have that one. Yeah, I know the plans changed quite a bit. It looks like we have a single drive in and out. So I'm going to stop sharing here, and we can walk through as a board the evaluation form that I sent in the packet. And so this kind of walks us through a synopsis of the project. I will make a comment. I did not have the permits box checked, and it does look like they're seeking some floodplain permits, which I believe they're at least in the permitting process for those. You also did receive an Michigan Natural Features Inventory Rare Species Review Letter that's included in the packet. So that review was already done. This was one of the parcels that fell within the area that requires that review. In terms of some of the site location items, the parcel is adjacent to, I guess, what we might qualify as a recreational area open to the public, because the KRVT does follow the river there. And then it is also across the street from Harrison Park, which is a very small, sort of unimproved or limited improvements owned by the city. So that's directly across the street in Gull Road. The site plan complies with restrictions in the wellhead protection overlay. We don't see any use of hazardous materials or fuels storage or anything like that on site with the final use. The site complies with the lot coverage standards, and the project did require public notice because it's adjacent to or close to within the setback of water. So that was sent on February 9th, or on or before. I think it might have been just before February 9th. Temporary construction fencing will be required and will be handled in regular site plan review. I don't at this time anticipate any variance being required, and stormwater requirements have yet to be approved. This project is coming here to the NFP review board first, and then it'll go to site plan review in the coming weeks. I think that one's already scheduled later, maybe at the beginning of March. Okay, so if we cover kind of feature by feature, starting with wetlands, this property was determined to have no impacts to wetlands or no wetlands located on the parcel. So there aren't any wetland standards to work with here. There is the water resource there, the Kalamazoo River that's on the site, and the required setback according to the zoning or the zoning code is 25 feet. And so that's been met on the site plan. And so we don't see any conflicts with the standards there. And then, as Debbie mentioned, there is the protected tree list. So there are special status trees on the property that are proposed for removal. And so you saw that list. And they outlined their replacement requirement and how they planned on meeting that requirement. And that was that 205 inches of replacement trees. And the landscaping plan that was included in the packet did include which species on that sheet that they were planning to use for replacement and their size as well. I guess I'll stop there and ask from your review, if you had any questions. I think the water resources one is pretty straightforward, but if you had questions, feel free to ask those. And then also, I think looking at that the special status tree or the tree removal table.
Yeah, I had some questions just about the tree list and just some suggestions about especially maybe the cultivars of Acer rubrum and saccharum, and if they've thought about the Dutch resistant elm, swamp white oak, basswood, maybe some more beneficial trees for wildlife. And instead of the honey locust, looks like I think that's a subspecies that isn't native to Michigan. And yeah, and then my second question was about addressing that letter from the public. And if I'm just curious about any impacts to flooding. I see that it looks like there's a rain garden on site, but obviously that seems like a citizen concern from neighbors.
Yeah, we did receive one response to the letter, and that was kind of their feedback. It was a business owner local to this area who has been around for an extended amount of time, and he was just bringing to our attention the likelihood for flooding. So we have observed that, at the existing building on site in recent years during extreme events, and we're replacing, there's an extensive floodplain here, but we are replacing the volumes at 100%. So you'll see on the landscape plans, I'm not sure if Jamie has any other plans readily available to show, but some large storm pond areas. And as far as floodplain goes, it's actually designed to, so we have a primary emergency vehicle drive lane would be the northernmost lane. And then in extreme flooding events, part of the parking will handle additional volume, if it surpasses the volume that can be handled in those ponds. Rain gardens, we actually, did not include in the proposed design just because of the contaminated soil nature. Nothing can be infiltrated locally, so these are lined ponds, but they are heavily planted and landscaped, and we want them to be aesthetically pleasing.
So Danielle, I did put up one of the site plans here. This, I think, is a landscape sheet again. But here is where you're seeing the storm ponds that Danielle mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some seed mixes that were mentioned on the plan here for those. And then I don't know, the plan here in the parking lots with these, I don't know if they're swales or if they're just landscape features. Can you speak to those at all?
Yeah, just landscape features. Preliminarily, we were hoping to utilize those for rain garden type application and partial stormwater storage and potential treatment. But due to the contaminated soils and the NFP restrictions, we have elected to primarily utilize those as landscape areas. So those do not plan to hold storm water.
I think Paul has a question, Jamie.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I've been trying to find the storm sewer plan. I was looking at it a lot this morning, but it looks, I'm pleased with the detention basins. You said those are lined, so there's no, will there be percolation there or no?
Yeah, they will be lined, so there will be no infiltration through those ponds. And the
Okay.
way the storm is designed is all the pavement, roof drainage, it's all collected in a piped network to assure we're not doing any infiltration on site. Typically, it's best management practices. You like to allow infiltration and spread it out. But here, the contamination is the primary concern. So prior to entering those storm ponds, it will pass through a manufactured storm treatment device, hydrodynamic separator type structure. So there will be one level of treatment there to reduce sedimentation and long-term maintenance of that pond. And then it'll settle in the pond. And then there is an outlet, and there's actually an existing storm outlet to the Kalamazoo River that we intended to reuse. And Eagle has recommended as part of the floodplain permit that we get a permit to replace that storm outlet structure in the case that field. Our survey wasn't real conclusive as to what that connected to or what condition that pipe was in. So in the case we find it's an unsuitable condition, there would be minimal impacts there from that storm pond to the outfall at the river. But advantageously, that would allow our design to assure that we're not receiving backflow into those ponds from the Kalamazoo River, because the existing outfall is at an elevation that's generally below your typical water elevation of the river.
Okay, that was my next thing. I've got the public stormwater system around your area there, and I don't see any outfalls. But you say that there is one there. It's an old one, but
yeah, there's several smaller culverts, connecting the west side of the Kalamazoo River Valley Trail to the east side and ultimately flowing to the river. But it appears as though there's one primary outlet, and that's what we are connecting to, and that's significantly deeper than the others.
okay, well,
It's probably not on the public network because perhaps it's not in the right of way. It's not city owned. It maybe would have been specific to this privately developed parcel in the past. We've also struggled to get record documents on that outfall specifically. That's why we have somewhat of an unknown condition as far as the status of its condition.
okay, and you're adding 2 outfalls to the river. Is that correct?
We are not adding any. We are proposing to replace the existing. We're proposing to connect to the existing, so there would be no disturbance of that riverbank was our original intent. But because of the lack of records and we're uncertain, we haven't televised the line at this point to be sure that it's in good functioning condition. We are proposing to replace the existing outfall. So there would be no increase in pipe size or increase in quantity of outfalls from what there is there right now.
Okay, I want to find that drawing again, but it shows 2 outfalls that you're adding in your drawings from the storm system. So I guess I don't understand unless I was, okay, all right.
Yeah, I can, we have a storm design package with all the calculations I can send you, but what you're probably seeing is the existing outfall and the proposed replacement. If I had to guess, it was kind of a last minute implementation for the Eagle permit, so it maybe wasn't exactly clear on the plans, perhaps. But
it was fair. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was fairly clear. Okay, I'm going to look for the drawing and see if I can't ask you again about it. Maybe that was in a parallel universe. So that I don't know. Okay. Oh, the other thing, you don't list what the seed mix is that you're going to use. You have, I call them wet foot plants. There's that you say you're going to put in the seed mix for the inside of the catch or the detention areas, and then for the upper part you have a prairie type seed mix, but I'm not finding what specifically is in that.
I don't think at the time that this was submitted, it had quite been determined yet. So I think that's still something we are looking into to determine what seed mix is most appropriate for that location.
Okay, I was just curious. Because there are lots of plants that you can pick from that will stand. I call them wet foot plants. You know, they'll stand to be submerged for several days sometimes. So, but if there's no percolation from these, that's going to be interesting. Okay. All right, that's it. I'm done.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Jamie, if you could kind of help us understand being a brownfield site and how developments within the city would normally be required to handle their stormwater. Because I think we're used to wanting sites to be able to handle their own stormwater and to promote infiltration. But it seems like that's, obviously not advisable if there's contaminated soils. But as I understand it, the outflows of those line ponds would just go to surface water, like to the river, upon overflow rather than infiltration. So it's a little bit, are we trading infiltration for surface water? Is that kind of the what you have to do with the brownfield site? Or can you help us? Feels like the water management between the directors and the public is kind of the biggest question. So maybe that would help.
Yeah, so it certainly depends on the site specific conditions, what contaminants are in soil and groundwater on the site. Our stormwater engineer and our environmental specialist at the city who are involved in the regular site plan review take a look at all of the environmentals, any baseline environmental assessment or anything that's been done, and kind of help work with the consultants are, there, or the development teams there, giving the proposal on what they need to do, if it's a response activity based on contamination, or if it's just how they design the stormwater in site conditions like that. And so we see lined ponds at brownfield sites that have certain existing soil contamination. I mean, on this site, I'm guessing the response activity is a lot of like capping or any soil they have to remove for excavations going to the appropriate landfill. And so they have to just be very careful on how they handle and what they do with that soil, and that it's, capped with some clean fill or vegetation to make sure they're not, letting it move around or cause an exposure issue for humans. And then also that groundwater, stormwater, things like that moving around the site aren't then causing some sort of exposure problem. Like they don't want contaminated groundwater to be moving through that site and into the river through, natural infiltration and groundwater movement. I don't know if Danielle can speak to that more specifically here, or if that answers your question, Mitch, but I would add our stormwater engineer in the pre-application phase of this is requiring the way the city stormwater regulations work. This site for the pre-construction condition right now it's a sort of mowed field with some of those trees that you saw in the site plan. That's not the condition they're able to work from. They are looking at sort of half of the buildings that used to be there at any given time. And so the stormwater engineer is looking at that pretty closely and has been working with Danielle and her team on how the system's designed.
Okay. Yeah, just trying to understand, because there's surface water in a floodplain kind of event that could come from the river. And then there's also just the precipitation coming off the impervious surfaces. So there's two sources, and just trying to understand how each one of those sources is being managed. So it sounds like rather than infiltration, the parking lot and impervious surface runoff is just being handled by infrastructure, but that's not going to treatment, that's going to the outflow to the river, correct?
Yeah, I think Danielle
Um,
mentioned that there are treatment devices within the system.
Okay,
Yeah, all flows from roofs, pavements on the proposed development will pass through a treatment structure that's designed to remove 80% of your total suspended solids and meet those criteria that are very firmly outlined in the NFP code, I guess. And then it will go to the pond. And I guess what I forgot to mention is from the pond, there's also a controlled outlet structure. So it won't be, during your typical rain events, a 25-year event and less, there will be no, extreme flow through that outflow. It'll all be controlled with a 0.15 CFS type discharge rate as allowable by the city until you get to the larger events, which will also double as a floodplain event, in which case there is a overflow designed so that pipe will be flowing full. If that answers your questions.
yeah,
And the
I think
storm
it
pond will
does.
kind of double as the, there's a precipitation event, and that's more immediate. And then, the floodplain event generally is along a little bit of a different timeline. So the ponds are intended to handle both. So the volume that we included in our storm detention is also doubles as a floodplain mitigation. And that's where I had mentioned the volume for floodplain that the site is designed to handle surpasses that pond. And in those extreme events, a portion of the parking will hold, 6 inches or so of water. You typically a lot of times have that 6-inch thickened edge curb along the sidewalk along that south portion we do. So, water along the river's edge of that parking will collect there.
Okay, so impervious
addition.
surfaces are cleaned by infrastructure, and you said that's 80% and meant to meet standards. And then is there maintenance of the pond, of the line portion of the ponds itself, once they fill with water, whatever does go into the overflow, does that have to be periodically maintained or removed?
Yeah. Yep. And that's why we put the manufactured treatment structure before the pond, because it's a lot less work to pull up a truck and vacuum out that structure than it is to re-excavate and disturb this pond and its plantings. So the structure will be maintained more frequently, but the lined pond will require a certain level of maintenance too. Once sedimentation is observable.
And I'll mention as part of the process that through site plan review and through public services, that all projects like this that are going to be, building stormwater infrastructure, they'll have a stormwater management or a stormwater agreement with the city, as anything like this is connected into city storm water and the permit the city holds with the state, or waters of the state and things like that. So I think some of that maintenance agreement and regular inspections is handled through that agreement, and then also handled by inspection staff through our public services department.
Yeah, thank you guys for that discussion, just with the public comments and our lack of understanding. But I would like to, I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I would like to get back to the native plant issue with, quite a few of these species. I just wonder if, I don't know, I'm looking at like white spruce, was very, I don't know about this particular cultivar, but not a friendly species down here with climate change. And I'm pretty certain there's no native forsythia to Michigan. And I have about 8 or more of these species. And I'm just wondering if you all would be willing to kind of re-examine these and take some suggestions for looking at future climate scenarios, species, and and I know some of these are really common in landscaping, but this being right on the Kalamazoo River, connected, going along the river, there's just so many other natural areas. And for instance, I'd like to see a basswood rather than, one of the Acer cultivars, because those are so important for pollinators. And this does provide kind of a linear habitat that connects a lot of other natural areas along the river.
Yeah, I think I speak for the whole team that we're very open to those suggestions, Ashley, and would be happy to, and we'll take that into consideration and happy to make some tweaks.
Okay, yeah, so that's really the only other issue I had with any part of this plan.
Yeah, I'll just kind of echo that too. We do allow nativars per the current NFP language. So I think that part of it is certainly allowed. But I think the other part of that we've been discussing is the hydrology, and that these trees, especially the ones that are proximal to the river, might be asked to do a lot more in terms of their function than what a normal landscaping tree would do. And some of those like basswood that Ashley mentioned are native floodplain trees. And so they might be able to more readily sort of handle those conditions and actually help with the water management function, whereas some of the cultivars might not be as well adapted for that because they're bred for foliage color or things like that. So.
Yeah, and I'd really like to see the new Dutch elm resistant elms, if they're available locally, being planted in some urban areas too, especially having their feet wet for potentially long periods of time with increasing flood events. So yeah, my suggestions, I just wrote down a couple. Swamp white oak, Kentucky coffee tree, you have sycamore on there, which is good. Just making sure you get the native sycamore rather than the London plane tree, and basswood and resistant elm. And then I'm not sure if I saw sambucus on there, but that would be good. And then the Ilex glabra, I believe isn't native, but we do have a couple Michigan holly, Ilex verticillata would be a good option. Yeah.
Yeah, we can look into those. And I just to note, a lot of those trees, like the sycamore, the more natural looking trees that provide more of that wildlife habitat, are placed more along that boundary. And then some of the other trees, such as you had mentioned the honey locust and the red maple, those are closer to the building, just to ease the maintenance of the sidewalks and the entries. So that's part of how the placement of those was, but we can look into adjusting those as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
That makes sense. Thanks. All right. If any more board comments, questions?
I was going to mention just the rest of the natural features. We didn't have any protected slopes on the site to contend with. And then if you had a chance to look at that natural, or for the natural heritage area, just if you had a chance to look at the MNFI letter, it looked to me like the conclusion was no likely negative impacts would occur. And I don't know if you had any comments or if that letter was satisfactory. I think that kind of takes care of our last natural feature.
I agreed with Mike Sanders' letter from MNFI, and I think overall this should be an improvement for that parcel. Yeah.
My only question was about that seed mix. So we don't have the seed mix, and it sounds like it's still a little bit in flux, but that is required to be all native species per the ordinance. So as far as I remember, so I just wanted to make sure that was understood, since we're not seeing the list.
Yes, understood.
Great.
And I can make sure as this moves through site plan and some of those finer details are fleshed out, that I'll keep an eye on that as well and make sure to share that back to you. I'll also mention that Danielle just sent a document here that I'm going to share out with you, and it's the utility plan. I think that Paul was referring to here. So let me forward that to anyone who wants to pull that up. Danielle, did you want me to open it up and share? Or do you want to let people review that on their own?
If you want me to clarify real quick, I have highlighted I think the components of interest, so it should be a fairly quick thing to
Yeah.
clarify for Paul.
No problem. Yeah, it's probably better for us to talk while we're all here on the line. Let me make this a little bit bigger. My computer is just a little slow opening this.
Yeah, so you'll notice once Jamie gets it pulled up, I have the two primary outlets I mentioned highlighted green down there. One is the existing 24-inch outlet to the river, and the other is our proposed replacement. And our notes there I have highlighted. They do say, you know, abandon the existing outfall and replace it with the new. As mentioned, our intent would be that when we get in the field, perhaps we can televise the existing line, and if it's found to be in good condition, we will reuse it rather than disturbing that riverbank. But due to the timeline of the Eagle permitting process and such, you know, as mentioned, it was their recommendation we apply for both now because it was a simple addition to the permit application versus the floodplain considerations. And then, you know, as mentioned, there's several other storm outfalls down there to the south. Those are smaller 8-inch outfalls, and they're at elevations that are quite a bit higher than those two 24 inches shown up top. And we are proposing to raise the new outfall by about a foot we could achieve. So that would improve the backflow condition in the river's high water elevation condition under floods. And then just one other thing I didn't correct at the time, but Jamie had mentioned no variance is required, and that's correct, but we did already obtain several variances approving the proposed plans as shown. I think variances for the 0 to 10 foot build to zone, and these were pretty complicated because of the considerations to existing and future zoning that I think Jamie mentioned early on. So any variances anticipated needed have already been obtained.
Yeah, that's correct. So this project did sort of through their early review stages have some zoning approvals that needed to happen. So that was done through was approved through the zoning. Did you have to go to the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals? Maybe it's just the ZBA. That was all done in December of last year. Had to do with, as Danielle mentioned, some build to setbacks from the street and some zoning districts, but wasn't an NFP related variance. So Paul, oh, it's your hand raised. Thank you. You can feel free to speak up. Did you get to see this plan as well as you can on a small screen?
Yeah, yes, I did. Thank you. Yep, and thank you, Danielle. That's great. You've got from, again, I don't know, I can't find the drawing I was looking at this morning, damn it. Anyway, I calculated then that you've got about 1.8 acres of parking surface and roads, and then you've got your buildings, of course, footprint. And I don't know, I just say that because I think this is a great project. I am not gonna stop it, that's for sure. I would encourage the stormwater group at the city to really scrutinize it. And I don't know, I must have been before my third cup of coffee this morning. So anyway, I am concerned about how, you know, the only feature really is the river. I shouldn't say the only feature, but you know, the river I am concerned about. So whatever the city feels is appropriate, I guess I am good with it, but I'd really like your stormwater folks to look at that really, really close. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Any other board comments or discussion on forgetting the address, but on 508 Harrison. Okay. Yeah, I think given the zoning that's there, it seems like a really thoughtful plan, and that you've really considered all these things. So thanks, Danielle and Katie, for educating us on that. So Jamie, this is a roll call vote.
Yes, so do you want to get a motion to approve the plan?
Sure.
I have a question before that, which is I would like to see that plant list changed first.
So it'd be conditional on seeing the swale mix. Ashley, are you talking about the tree?
Both.
Do you want to
Okay.
make that? Oh, go ahead, Mitch.
I was just gonna say, yeah, Jamie, how do you want to
I'm
handle
not
that?
making the motion. I'm just saying that's what I want. Jamie, can we make the motion say that is what my question?
Like conditional kind of thing?
We
That work,
could.
Jamie?
Yeah, Paul has his hand up.
Yes, please. Thank you. The OCBA folks, did either one of you work on the Borges building over in Ashtimo Township, just across Drake Road from Asylum Lake?
Hi, Paul. No, neither Katie nor Deborah worked on that, or I didn't either.
Okay. I love that plant list for that site. So, you know, you might want to cut and paste some stuff. It's really a great list, whoever at your firm made it. Yeah. Okay. Just a comment.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. So can we entertain a motion to approve the 508 Harrison project pending some further consideration of tree choices and seeing the swale prairie mix? That's a mouthful.
Support.
Yep.
Okay. So all in favor, Jamie, you wanted to do a roll call vote?
Yes. One moment. So I have the revised motion approval conditional upon the revised native plant list and prairie seed. I'll say stormwater and prairie seed mix. And just for folks listening and the applicants here today, that's something that I typically then follow through with. I can pass that along, those revisions along to the board, but then it's not, you shouldn't have to come back to the board. We can make sure that staff can manage making sure those changes happen and then update the board at their next meeting. So a roll call on that proposal. We had Ashley motion, Paul support. Did I get that right?
Sure. That's good.
Thanks for being patient, everyone. So Colwick,
Yes.
Fuller,
Yes.
Leto,
Yes.
McNellis,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
and Sylvester.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Motion carries. Okay, if that's all with that one, Jamie, I think the other order of new business that was added were the previous, the dates that Jamie had called off for the 2021 NFP Review Board meeting schedule. And I don't think we probably need to read those again, but can I entertain a motion to approve that board meeting schedule for 2021? Looks like Paul's got his.
I move.
All right.
I'll second.
All right, Aaron, support. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, item F on the agenda, old business, is I think kind of no action required, but an update from Jamie on where we stand with NFP2 map and text amendments in the joint meeting.
Yes, so what I wanted to really make sure everybody, you should already have this on your calendars, but we're planning on doing a joint meeting with the Planning Commission next month. It's March 23rd. So it's your regular monthly meeting. And the idea is inviting planning commissioners to the meeting to kind of relaunch the phase 2 map revisions and some text amendments. I think that through meetings that this board had last fall, we kind of talked through the feedback that you had heard both at your own meetings in September and October, and then what you heard at the Planning Commission from the public and the commissioners. And so there may be some more substantial text amendments than what were proposed in November to sort of respond to some of the public's concern and some of the property owners' concerns. And so the idea of the joint meeting in March is sort of I guess I'd call it a kickoff to reintroduce the revisions. There are going to be, there's going to be a transition. So I think you'll see there's probably going to be, I think, 3 new planning commissioners. They probably won't actually officially serve on their board until April, but we're going to invite the new folks in as well. I think they've been selected. So we'll probably get a few of the outgoing folks and some of the incoming commissioners. So that'll be really nice. And I think it's just going to be an opportunity to, I know last fall your boards, never got to meet together. And so I think this way they can ask questions of you, the board members. Staff will be there to help give a presentation to remind everyone of kind of how we arrived at and what the process was, sort of from the technical perspective on how the map was developed, how those parcels were chosen and what some of those main criteria were. And then just as an update overall, we have had a few board members looking at some of the tables and the text and have provided staff with some input on, some recommendations for changes. And so staff's working on, and we'll be able to start talking about, what would some of those text amendments look like? Based on what we heard from the public, we definitely heard concerns about the tree standard in particular. And I think that's one that staff have been directed to really look at. And so, yeah, I just wanted everyone to know that kind of March will start things off. It'll be open to the public. And that's the other thing. We've been having our citizen comments at the end of our meetings. And that's one of those things I'd like to change for our agendas, probably moving forward, that we let people make those comments at the beginning of the meeting. I think that makes a lot more sense. So Mitch and other board members, when you see the agenda come out, if we need that switch, if I failed to make it, please remind me.
Okay.
And then I think at that meeting next month, we'll also be able to kind of, by that time, we'll probably have a good public engagement schedule, right? We'll start being able to put together kind of when this information might go to the full planning commission on their agenda to put a proposal in front of them. Just as a sort of matter of business, the way they have asked city staff, that's the planning commission has asked city staff to try to give them sort of three different meetings where they've had some introduction to and some ability to ask some questions about a big rezoning project like this one before it lands on their agenda. So that's gonna, it's gonna kick off with, I think in February this month, the planning department heard an update, or the planning commission heard an update from city planner, just generally speaking. And then we'll have this joint meeting. We'll have to kind of bring it to them again and get some information in front of them before a third time before it goes to their agenda. So we have some time, and we'll start kind of working through that stepwise process in March.
Jamie, can you remind everyone what the date is for the joint meeting?
Yeah, that's Tuesday, March 23rd at 4 p.m. So it's your regular meeting, and we've invited planning commissioners to join.
Regular time.
And then I did want to let you know, I forwarded, this was right before our meeting, but I forwarded a comment from the public about, it was related to a comment this individual made in the November NFP review board meeting, but it's also a letter that was sent to the planning commission. So please look over that and read that as well.
All right. Any questions for Jamie about the text amendments or planning commission meeting before we move to just general board comments, if there are any? Okay. Item G is board comments. Was there any additional discussion that folks wanted to get at related to this project or in general amongst board members? Go for it, Paul.
Yeah, sorry, I keep missing my mute thing. Maybe that's a good thing. You sent a map from the NFP proposed additions from June of 2020, right? Is that the one that we're using? Because I thought that there were quite a few differences between that and the one that came out in November on the website.
Yes, there are differences on that, Paul. That's a good point. So that that map from June was a really early and what I'd call sort of the raw data that Nolan helped the board develop. And then in July and August, as sort of the public input process, and I know the board, the NFP review board looked at that map, we sort of called down the list, right? We found, we used some criteria and applied it, and then we ended up with a little bit different map, and that was the one that was presented in November. So I can make sure that we should maybe talk offline to make sure I'm being really clear on sort of which map was the one that was used in November.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. The one that I've been going off of is the one that was posted on the website in November.
Yes.
Right. But yeah, and that's, yeah.
There were a couple of versions, there was one that came out and was posted on the city's website in August. And then we had, the 160 plus comments from the public, those pins that they had dropped. And so we went through a couple of iterations and, added parcels, removed parcels kind of based on some of that feedback. I know you had a couple of meetings and ended up calling a special meeting to make sure there was more time for public input. So you're right. There's always that issue of version control. There were, a couple of those, and you guys definitely looked at a lot of different maps for a lot of months last year.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's great.
But I would say that June map that you had is sort of the very raw data kind of map, and just one that Nolan had been working on and threw out there as sort of any and every criteria that the board had talked about, and sort of threw those all on a map to kind of look at what that looked like.
I have a related question to Paul. So the sort of plant group and the mapping subgroups have been meeting to kind of feed the NFP2 that the Planning Commission and the City Commission would later see. At what point will our group kind of internally see what the new version looks like? Will that be at the same time that the Planning Commission sees it, or?
No, I'll try to work on making sure. I think we need to, have this board look at and see some information before we make a formal proposal to the Planning Commission.
Right. Okay. That was kind of why I was thinking. Great. Yeah. And then the other just comment I'll make is I was trying to think about text amendments that have been suggested or talked about, and how we might have viewed this project differently if we were in the sort of NFP phase 2 portion. I don't know, Jamie, maybe there's others that I'm not thinking of. The biggest one would have been the native R piece, which would be sort of like a board at board discretion to approve of native Rs. And I think the current language is that native Rs are allowed kind of blanket. Is that correct?
That is correct. So one of the proposed amendments last November to the text was to give the NFP review board a little more authority to make those. Let me step back. The new text would say natives only, but allow the NFP review board to I'll make that decision to allow other types of plants and plant species. And that was a request of the Zoning Board of Appeals, because they felt like, a variance to them didn't really mean much in terms of, they didn't know a lot about whether they should or shouldn't allow a certain plant. So that is, I think, still one of those recommendations, kind of hearing from the ZBA and seeing how this board has worked. That would be one of the, I think, the recommendations that would probably continue to move forward to the Planning Commission, is to allow this board to have more of that ability to allow, I guess, the authority to allow different species based on your expertise.
Okay. So phase 2 would say all landscaping is required to be native species, and then cultivar or nativars would just be approved as needed or as proposed during the meetings. Okay. Cool. Any other board comments?
Question, Jamie. I just now see this correspondence from November 2nd from Craig Martin and Elizabeth Martin. So forgive me if I missed it, but why is this being sent now? Well, I think we already saw this or something very similar to it back at that time.
Yeah, so I think this was in response. I think the first paragraph talked about how the comment was reflected in the meeting minutes didn't seem to align with the letter that was sent and what Mr. Martin recalled, saying at that November meeting. I think for the minutes, the recording of the video was used, or the recording of the meeting was used, but he wanted to make sure that you all had that clarification and had his direct comments.
Oh, I understand now. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. There's no more board comments.
I have just one quick thing.
Sorry, Erin.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to call everyone's attention to an article that was in the Wall Street Journal a couple weeks ago that I think might be relevant to some of our work and maybe future mapping projects. So it's the title, and I can send out a link, but the title is "For Better Health During the Pandemic, Is 2 Hours Outdoors the New 10,000 Steps?" And it's what's interesting about it, they cite a lot of different research on the health benefits of nature, and maybe more for us, a lot of, they talk a lot about some new mapping tools that are being used around the world to quantify nature in urban areas. And so I haven't dug too deeply yet, but I think there's a lot of potential there for us, finding what parts of the city have nature deficits that some of the work we do can enhance. So anyway, I'll send out the link, but I wanted folks to see that. And it also, I think, highlights the importance of the work we're doing in protecting natural areas in an urban area has really significant health benefits.
I'll also forward a document that was sent to staff recently, and it was, and maybe it was mentioned, Erin, in the article, so disregard if it's a duplicate, but it was a way to also evaluate sort of the urban nature quotient, I guess, of an area. And it was sort of compared to how we do walkability scores for new developments, right? Like how walkable are they? And this was a nature score in that same sort of way. So I'll forward that on. I think it's related and could be another good piece to think about.
Great. Thank you. Any other board comments? Discussion? Okay. Do we have any citizen comments? We had the letter that someone sent in regarding the 508 Harrison project that we read. So we'd be going by voicemail or.
We do have one citizen comment today.
Hi, my name is Tina McClinton. I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I've been here all my life. I was calling because I haven't seen a meeting from you, and I just happened to catch this one. It's late for work, but I wanted to call in and see, because the last time we had the meeting, we were talking about preserving green spaces in natural wetlands, and we have one on Lake and John and Stockbridge that we've been trying to save since December 18th, 2018. Because it helps us with flooding. It helps the whole neighborhood. It's a little piece of country in the city. It's Southtown neighborhood. It's quiet. It's peaceful. It has a lot of animals. Matter of fact, we've been having a falcon around lately, and then we've been seeing coyotes and hearing them howl for about the past 2 weeks. So we have deer, we have owls, we have foxes, we have cranes, we have all kinds of animals that live there in this little space, green space. I don't know if this is what this meeting is about, but this green space on Lake Street helps me with flooding, helps our whole neighborhood with flooding. We don't get water in front of our house. The city's storm drains fill up full of water. Doesn't take much either. Backs up in the streets. Somehow it backs up the sanitary sewers, and they come up in our drains in our basement. And when they took 12 acres away across the street of natural green space on Lake Street to build KBCC growing field, now we used to only flood, before they did that, we used to only flood once every 10 years. Now it's like from 2017, when KBCC growing field came on Lake Street, now we flood 2 to 3 times a year, every year. And it's not cheap to keep putting in furnaces and water heaters and fixing the floor and the basement, things that water destroys. And I don't have water around my home. I don't have water in my yard. I don't have water in front of my house. This green space absorbs the water like a sponge and helps us with flooding. That's all I wanted to bring up. I'm hoping you're still going to protect lakes in Stockbridge, like you said at the last meeting we was at. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.
And that was the only public comment.
Okay. Heard a lot about that spot.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, yes, and last I looked, there's quite a large piece of that area at Lake and in John Street there that is under the NFP umbrella. So, well, maybe that's not a good term, but so I mean, I hear them. I've been listening, and I think we've addressed that pretty well. So I don't know. That's it.
I think you're right. I think it is included to the extent of what NFP can actually do, I think. Okay. No more citizen comments. We can adjourn the meeting.
We actually just got one more citizen comment that just came in.
Okay, let's do it.
This is Richard Stewart. I reside in the city in the Southtown neighborhood. I'm calling to ask for your assistance to continue to protect the 9 parcels between Lake and Stockbridge just east of John Street. The area is a partial wetland. It's our natural wildlife habitat, natural green space, and last remaining watershed that protects the neighbors from flooding. It is undeveloped. There's a couple hundred trees, and there's a predatory developer that's insistent on building on it, even though he's been given alternate sites that are more appropriate, wouldn't result in destruction of natural feature. I've been in touch with the DEQ, and they have not issued a final permit to destroy the area, which may be a surprise to you. So I just want you all on the same page, and I'm hoping I can count on each of you to help protect our natural green space. It's the only natural feature in Southtown, and it is made up of 9 parcels to make sure you include them all when the time comes to finalize that. I appreciate your assistance. Have a good day.
And that's the last public comment.
And Jamie, you haven't received any inquiry from anyone looking at those sites formally at this point or anything, right?
The sites that were mentioned in that public comment,
Yep, the lake and Stockbridge.
those parcels, the ones that are under common ownership, are part of a proposed affordable housing development that has a approved site plan. And so that approved site plan and the development would be sort of in effect, even if the overlay district were applied to that site, that would still be in effect and valid for 18 months or whatever the period is for the city.
Okay.
And full disclosure, that's the project that that my partner and I, our company, we have our fingerprints on that project. We've worked on that for several years with the Lift Foundation in Kalamazoo, and that really is an affordable housing project that will serve a high percentage of persons needing permanent supportive housing. Sometimes affordable housing projects are serving a fairly high percentage of area median income, but we're really looking at a much more challenged population for this project.
Yeah. And if you guys want to get some sort of presentation or some updates, I could maybe have staff give an update and talk a little bit about natural features there. They dealt with and looked a lot at floodplain because it's again, it's in the floodplain. It's the floodplain permit that they're seeking. They've dealt a lot with open green space, trees. They do have some soil issues there because of the sort of wetland soils that are there. So there's foundation, special foundation work, I think, or work that's had to been done to address that. So I feel like someone more familiar with the project than me, city staff, could give a presentation. I know the ECC, the Environmental Concerns Committee, had a sort of a similar presentation to look at that site plan and kind of look at all of the considerations that were done. Even though it isn't currently an NFP, those were just definitely topics that came up through regular site plan review.
Okay, so that's the issue, is that those parcels were not in the original NFP map. And then we are trying to add them, but the Planning Commission has not accepted our new map. That's where we're at. Okay, I just couldn't remember quite what, I thought we had some parcels in NFP in that area, but they were pretty much all added in our phase 2.
That's a great question. I have the map up right now. I think the only parcels that are currently in the overlay district are those immediately adjacent to Portage Creek. And so there is, between these and the creek, there's a city-owned parcel. Our city Stockbridge facility is the one that's actually on the water body. And then these are all to the west of it.
Okay. But in it, like, kind of the direct response to the callers is that we're working on putting these parcels into the natural features protection overlay.
One thing to keep in mind as well, and this is not regarding this specific site, is many times when developers announce a project and it's out in the public media, you get the impression that the project is a certainty and that all the money's in the bank and they're going to start bulldozing tomorrow. And that's not the case. And I think the project on Harrison Street also has submitted an application to MSHDA for financing under the low income housing tax credit allocation that MSHDA has. This project on Stockbridge and Lake is also there. There's a project that was announced, a senior housing project for Burdick Street. That was a MSHDA project, a mid-rise building near Burdick and Cedar Street. I don't know if you saw that. You get the impression these projects are going to start work tomorrow, and that's just not the case. The funds are very competitive, and MSHDA will not. We're really concerned about how MSHDA has scored the projects thus far for Kalamazoo County. And so we shall see what gets developed and when for any of these sites.
That's a great point, Alan. And that's kind of why I said, the site plan certainly has a shelf life, although, it's in force and kind of controls if the zoning were to sort of change around it in the meantime. But it does have a shelf life. If the project weren't funded and didn't move forward, that would eventually expire. Or I would even say if maybe a project has been proposed, and we've seen this, right? Maybe a project has been proposed and for whatever reason, the current landowner decides to sell it. If another project comes forward that's substantially different, then the city would require them to kind of start over. This is a new and different plan for this site. We'd go back through the site plan review process. And then whatever rules, whatever zoning is in place at that time, then those rules, control. So just to give you a little bit of sense of, it's linear, but it can kind of, some of these projects, they also might get a approved site plan and it might take 18 months before they're really ready to be built, and we'll still rely on that old site plan and old rules if that plan were, all approved at the time that it was proposed. So it can take a while and some things never materialize.
We've been working on this site for 5 years now, and that's not uncommon that you have, up to 10 years before you actually turn the key.
Just a quick technical question. So the areas between Lake Street and Stockbridge, so some of the parcels are on the city GIS are considered Stockbridge parcels and some are Lake Street. It looks like the Lake Street ones, majority of them are owned by Bronson, and the big Stockbridge one is owned by Kalamazoo County Housing Choices. Is the latter the one that we're talking about?
Actually, it's both of those. And
okay.
Kalamazoo Housing Choices is an entity that is the currently controls the rights for that. It has to do with MISTA rules. The final developer can't own the property when it gets funded by MISTA. So you have to hold it in different entities. And Bronson owns those other sites. They've owned them forever, and they've had interest in affordable housing near the downtown area for obvious reasons. So that's how Bronson was part of this conversation a long time ago.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. I think we're good. Go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, Mitch.
Bye all.
Thanks, everybody. Catch you later.
See ya.